So, if you've met me, you know I'm on the taller side. And at almost 6 feet tall, I decided that one day trying to be good at CrossFit was a good idea, right? And what ended up happening was I chased the leaderboard and was getting absolutely smoked by women that were 6 inches shorter than me. And I was getting smoked in a competition that they didn't even know that we were having. And this is part of what no one warned you about as you transition from sport to real life into other activities, right? You spend years competing in your sport. And when it ends, that competitive itch, it doesn't go away. It rears its ugly head in different ways. And I spent a good chunk of my early 30s trying to scratch that itch, chasing the leaderboard at CrossFit Omnia in Denver. And, it started as, oh, cool, I'll go work out a couple times there, into I'm working out here 6 days a week. I've got a coach. I'm doing all the things. Why am I not a games athlete? That same competitive itch also had me sign up for a sprint triathlon with very little training because one of my clients said that they also needed a accountability buddy, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And I should probably do okay because I'm pretty athletic, right? I had no business doing that. And even now, any sort of physical, challenge that comes around, as random as it may be, like I will go and do it, knowing that it's probably against my best judgment, only because it's going to ruin my mood if someone beats me. And so this is one of the things that I've worked through over the years, because I'll just say it. I've probably actually tarnished a few friendships along the way because I couldn't stop turning things that were supposed to be fun into a competition that no one else agreed to. And so if you played a sport at any level, and a sport that actually mattered to you, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. Right? This competitive drive never really clocks out, and the question is never, do you still have it? You know you have something. You just don't know how sharp it is. And I want to name that competitive edge where it goes wrong. What's up, and welcome back. I'm glad you're here again with me this week. And again, if you're new, I'm Jenny. I spent my days grinding my college life away through Division I basketball. And I know what it feels like to perform at a high level when you asked your body to do the thing and it never questioned your request. And then you transition into the real world where there's no season for your body to answer to anymore. And so for the last 15 years, I've coached ex-athletes through this exact transition, getting strong, getting healthy, and keeping it that way rather than chasing a challenge or trying to peak or get beach ready and then crashing back to earth where they started. And I'm not guessing at a lot of the stuff that I share with you. I actually run these protocols with my real clients and I watch it work in real time. And these are all protocols that I've sharpened for over a decade with real live people, right? And so if you used to compete and you want your body to work for you again without turning your life, in the gym into a second job, you're in the right place. So this week's newsletter was called Down With OPP, and it's not the Naughty by Nature song that you're probably thinking about here, because we're a little older and we know these tunes. But I want to go deeper on this idea of other people's progress and your drive to compare yourself to others. And I don't think this was just for the ex-athletes, but I think it's for those who have that internal drive of, I have to do better, and I'm going to compare everything that I do to a comparable outside. So we're not talking about real estate where you're comparing a house that's similar in square footage, in neighborhood, in school district, and trying to set a value on it. We're actually trying to help improve our self-worth, okay? And the only way that we can do that is to measure our self-worth for how good we used to be, to how good we are now. And maybe I even said that wrong. It's not about how good we used to be. It's how are we improving other areas of our lives um, without feeling weirdly deflated because a friend hit a milestone that you thought you should hit first, or you casually checked in on someone's Strava to check their mileage and their time, and you're like, God damn it, why are they beating me, right? This episode is for you because that competitive wiring is probably more common than people like to admit out loud. But I want to put a name to it, and that's why I started off this with this idea of other people's progress, because this is the thing that will hijack your mindset once you retire from sport. When you're done walking through that transitory phase of your life, going from sport into the new normal. And this is part of I'll share part of the framework that I use with my clients, because I think it's important that we don't lose that competitive drive. We just give it a new direction and a new path to follow, because this is the thing that sets you apart from NARPs. And hopefully you guys are picking up on this term, the non-athletic regular people, the NARPs. So let's get into it, right? So to put a name to this, and I've already mentioned it, it's OPP, okay? And again, that stands for other people's progress. And, it's different than other people's P's that Naughty by Nature talks about. And it's actually equally catchy, but not quite as fun. And you don't really sing a song to it, right? So when I look back to the time that I decided, you know what, it's time to give up this hoop dream. You're not playing anymore. You're not coaching anymore. It's time to move into the normal real world. I was still competing in my head, right? I didn't have a jersey anymore, but I got into personal training, even though initially my goal was to get into something non-competitive like cardiac rehab, right? So exercise physiology was the route that I went with my master's degree, and somehow ended up in personal training, which is totally fine, because I've enjoyed a fantastic career and it's gotten me to being able to do what I love now. But I got into personal training, and my goal when I started was to be the best trainer in the building, right? Which that took off, and I was like, all right, I'm as smart, if not smarter, than some of these guys in some cases. Then I needed that to lead into productivity, because if you know anything about personal training, you also need to train clients in service sessions to actually make some money. So then my goal changed to I need to run the most sessions out of anyone on this staff, right? And that competitiveness is really what helped me early on in my career. And I moved from just a personal trainer to a PT manager to a national director of fitness. And that drive worked for me most of the time. But then there were also times it actually didn't. There were times that it was more detrimental to the relationships that I was trying to foster and build with my coworkers and my team, than it was me trying to, move ahead in the corporate ranks. And I think back to one of the first gyms that I worked at, and it was a competition. Like, there were a few of us that just didn't get along because we were trying to win our own races but competing against each other. And looking back, like, had we set the egos aside a little bit, we probably could have been even more successful than we were individually. We probably could have actually been more successful as a team. And so, as I kind of shift my focus away from work and into what I was doing for my fitness at that time, 2016, I started dabbling in CrossFit before it fully engulfed my every waking free moment. And this is where this idea of OPP finally caught up with me. Like, this CrossFit thing started as an outlet. Like, I went to a couple classes with a friend. We were like, yeah, we're not the best at this gym, but we need something that's a little bit better is probably not the right word, a little bit more competitive. And I think that's actually the conversation Aaron and I had when we were talking about moving from CrossFit Kali, which was a women's only CrossFit gym, to CrossFit Omnia, which was and is a gym that has athletes that go to the CrossFit Games every year. Okay. And so what I decided I needed was the intensity and the, bigger pond to be in, because I never want to be the smartest in the room. I never want to be the best in the room, because I know that growth is limited there. But for some reason, having something that was slightly unattainable was attractive to me at that time, right? So by now you probably know my track record. It was, just a few weeks into moving gyms that I was quietly in my head racing and challenging everyone in that room. Now, little did they know that's what they were doing, but we'd get our names on the leaderboard every day, and then I'd go back and check the app after to see where I finished out of all the classes, and then truly and genuinely getting angry when I didn't score well, right? And then, it's one of those things where you're like, looking back, it's like, gosh, I was stupid. Now, I still am very stupid when it comes to competitive things. It's gotten a lot better because now I'm aware that I'm stupid, but before I didn't know that I was stupid. I was unaware and stupid, which is a bad place to be in. And if you've ever been time capped by a workout when you've decided to go RX or even RX plus, you know how frustrating that can be, right? So at this point in my workout career, right, I wasn't training anymore, right? I was actually just doing the workout, completing the workout, but then auditing my results against everyone else's in every single class. And if you know anything about CrossFit, it's randomly programmed. You don't do the same workout any days in a row or any weeks in a row for the most part. You might get a strength section that you run, squat on Mondays, and that progresses over weeks at a time. But for the most part, you're getting a different stimulus every single workout. And that's part of the CrossFit methodology. And I get that. But for folks who err more towards the competitive side, not having a benchmark to work towards actually sets us up for failure more so than it does people that are just like, oh, I'm doing it, and then not really worried about the results. Now, the best thing that could have happened to me, and this is probably a controversial take, was that COVID happened and it shut down the gym, shut down Omnia, shut down the gyms that I was actually working at as the national director of fitness for a while. And the least I can say is thank goodness, because it took me out of that environment where I felt like I was always having to compete for my own worth within that circle of people who had no impact on my life at all. You're competing against someone who finished 15th in the CrossFit Games as an individual, right? You're like, that's just not it. That the comparison is stupid. And I think, this idea of other people's progress, it doesn't feel like a problem while it's happening. It feels like a drive. You're compelled to chase praise, to chase, winning. And to be honest, that's the thing that made us really good as athletes, because it's the thing that got you your scholarship. It's the thing that helped you earn your starting spot or a promotion at work. And there's really no internal alarm bell, because on the surface, this looks like the trait that made you good at everything up to this point. And that's what kind of makes it addictive on the flip side, right? It's a habit that if you don't point it at the right target will get you into trouble. Now, when Omnia closed, this actually pushed me back into a more traditional strength conditioning program, which is what I had come up on, which is what all my education, like CrossFit was just fun because it was fitness, but it wasn't anything I had to think about. I could just go and do the thing. Whereas this forced me to kind of realign my training philosophy for myself, to help realign some of the training philosophies I was using with my clients. And that time away, that space away from that environment was when I finally saw what I had actually done wrong, right? And it wasn't just my attitude. Um, it was also the math of the situation, right? So the nice thing about CrossFit is that it reminded me how to work hard again. It made me feel athletic because I was chasing the intensity that that I felt when we would have to do timed runs or team building workouts, right? But I was trying to compete in this sport with quotes, by taking the group fitness class. And stupid me, again, looking back, hindsight is 2020. It will always be 2020. Um, that I was taking a group fitness class thinking that I was going to compete at a high level. Nah, dog. That was a total mismatch, right? It's not one you're ever going to win. But eventually, like, I moved past the class piece and started doing accessory work. I got a coach to help me with some of the gymnastic skills. But at the end of the day, it was a mismatch of my body, my skills, and the output that I was seeking. There was always going to be a ceiling. And I think the bigger mismatch that a lot of people miss when it comes to stuff like this, especially when they start getting frustrated with the workouts, is that um, you know classes like CrossFit, like I talked about last week with Orange Theory, right? Those are non-specific workouts. They may have a general bias, but you're not working towards anything specifically. It's random skills, it's random weights, it's a random rep scheme, and it's different every single day. And you walk in expecting specific results. But again, it is a true mismatch. When you have general expectations, then you can follow a general program. When you have specific expectations, then you need to have a specific program. And with that comes this idea of a benchmark to then measure yourself against. It's the high water line that you try to get back up to. And if you don't have this idea of a benchmark, then the only thing that you're left to compete against in these general classes is the person next to you. It could be the splat points, it could be the MEPS, it could be CrossFit Games points. Like, I don't, it's one of the leaderboard. That's the measure in class. Like, you want to be top of the leaderboard. Okay, cool. But that's minimal compared to the results that you're actually seeking, because when you get into something that's high intensity training, you want your body to reflect it. And in my article, I actually showed a before, well, not a before, but a during CrossFit photo of me compared to one that I took just a couple months ago. Now I'm a much more tan than before. But the photo from 2016 that I found, it was when or sorry, not 2016, 2018 that I had found, I was relatively lean. I was probably still 13% body fat or so. I was muscled, but I wasn't as, call myself yoked now. That seems a little silly, but I'm much more muscled. I probably weigh about 10 pounds more now than I did 8 years ago, but I look fuller. Like, then I just look skinny. Like, there was so much high intensity work. I probably wasn't eating it. Actually, I know I wasn't eating enough. And I was trying to perform at a high level and compete with people, and I wasn't taking care of the things I needed to. So now at 170 pounds, it's like, all right, well, you've got a good engine. You're way stronger than you were. Maybe the gymnastic skills aren't there, but in my mind, I look better now, 8 years later, than I did back then when I was doing CrossFit 6 days a week. And it's one of those weird things, like the transformation kind of happened right before my eyes, right? I made the switch, I stepped away, I went back to a traditional, upper lower split, started training to get strong, not necessarily to change my body. And the transformation just kind of happened. I was able to eat a little bit better because, things were closed down. We were eating at home a little bit more. I wasn't on the run. And the hard part, I think for me, that took me an embarrassingly long time to actually understand, and I'm glad I do now, is that there's still a comparison to make. But the comparison isn't made against you and something else. It's made against you and yourself. I still measure myself against benchmarks, but I've just changed who and what I'm measuring myself against. So instead of like trying to be as good at some of these gymnastic movements as the 5'5" women, putting up a better score, they deadlift, they move it like 2 inches, and then when they squat, they sit down 2 inches, right? I got a long way to go because I got some long legs, right? I began competing against the version of me from a week ago, from 2 weeks ago. I started competing against the logbook, right? Where I'm writing down my sets and reps and weights every week. And before we move on, I'm gonna do a quick gut check here, because I don't want you to listen to this and be inspired and be like, oh yeah, that's cool, but I'm still not as good as anyone else. No, I want to make sure that you have something that you can compare against, even if it's just your workouts, right? So right now, are your workouts giving you a number or a rep or a time, something that you can hold up against each week or each month and say, yes, I'm better? Or are your workouts just giving you a room full of other people that you're sizing yourself up against? Oh, I'm not as thin as her. I'm not as fast as her. I'm not as strong, right? Like, you got to understand the environment that you're in and making sure that you have something that will help you compare your own progress against your actions. Because at the end of the day, you are really the only person who matters in your world. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of others. But that doesn't give you the license to compare yourself against others before you go take care of them, okay? And so getting back to the story, now that I've digressed multiple times and gone on these adventures and tangents, when I made that switch inside the gym, right, of not competing against other people and kind of reflecting the competition back on myself, that didn't just stay in the gym. I do believe that is where I hit an inflection point in my leadership skills at work. It was one of those things where, again, I'm always competitive, so I'm always trying to win. And not competing against my coworkers was probably one of the best shifts professionally that I've had, where I'm like, I'm going to kick their ass in whatever it is. I'm going to be the better presenter. I'm going to be the smarter person, right? I started learning for my own sake, like, how can I show up as a better leader, as a better role model, as a better direct report in some ways. Not how can I show up better than that asshole next door because that's the favorite child. Like, right? It's one of those things that once you figure that out, and if it happens in the gym first and carries over into the professional world, awesome. And if it happens the other way around, still not the worst thing in the world to happen, okay? So instead of trying to be the best person in the room that I walk into, it was kind of a step back into humility and saying, okay, where are my gaps and how can I improve them, versus continuing to assert my dominance using my strengths. And so when you start to work this way, things start to feel much less cutthroat, right? You now control much of your destiny rather than hoping that the chips fall in your favor because you're competing against your peers, okay? When you do the work on yourself, doors tend to open on their own for you. And I know it sounds overly simplified, but I promise it's not, right? And when you do that, the doors open, your workouts actually start to bring you energy instead of disappointment. Like, I dreaded going to the gym because I hated losing so much, but guess what? I still showed up every day. But now I show up every day because it's more of a celebration of what I can do. And when you can do that same thing at work, instead of, this low simmering annoyance that you might tend to have, I know I'm guilty of it, that actually when you work on projects, they bring you life because it's a new challenge, it's a new adventure. And I want to be really clear on this. I am not perfect. You've heard me mention that I am still uber competitive when it comes to dumb physical challenges. Like I did this thing at the national convention or national conference a couple weeks ago where I wanted to do the squat test, or I want to go see how much I can pull on a deadlift, right? I am nowhere near perfect, but I have made a shift and I have committed to that shift. And it's had an impact on my life, on my health, on my training. All of it has moved in the right direction, has moved for the better. It's not anything that happened overnight, but it has consistently improved over the last 6 years, right? And so if you've played sport at any level, I bet you've felt this exact same way also. You're too competitive for your own good. And sometimes it might cost you, whether that's in the gym because you're ego lifting, or outside the gym because you compete with your friend who's also maybe a coworker and you piss them off, and maybe you lose that friend, right? Like I'm surprised my good friend Jess is still friends with me, because the first time I did the CrossFit Open and she was the I didn't know her at the time, but she ended up judging one of the workouts, and I was a total bitch because I got no repped on a couple. The person next to me who was doing the exact same thing did not get no repped, and I'm like, what is this? Right? So instead of, being and showing up as my best self, I showed up as a jerk. And Jess, I'm sorry. Hopefully you've forgotten that as much as I would like to. But again, I made the commitment to be better, to compete against myself. And so this whole thing, this whole idea, if I were to boil it down into a single line, is that the competition is in the mirror. It's you looking at yourself and trying to beat that person every single day. And when you do that, you've got a long runway of success ahead of you. But when you keep worrying about your peers and what they're doing or not doing, you're worried about other people's progress, then that's almost like a fast track to burnout and resentment. That's it, right? That's the fork in the road. That's the bifurcation. As soon as you get to this point and you say, you know what? I'm competing against me. I'm not competing against everyone else. That is when you start to feel a difference. And what made you an athlete in the first place was leaning into your strengths, fixing your weaknesses, and staying proactive instead of reactive or back on your heels, right? That skill set didn't magically disappear when you stopped playing your sport and you got into your real life, that second season. It's still there, it's still intact, and it could be slightly toxic, depending on who you are, if you're like me. And here's the thing, if you are actually trying to rebuild some version of your athletic body, you're trying to transform your outward appearance to regain a little bit more of that athletic identity, here's the move. Stop competing for the outcome. Stop looking at the scoreboard, or the scale in this case, and start competing with the process. Now that's going to sound like some external vague thing that I just told you not to do. It's not. And trust me on this one, right? It is more of, are you committed to compliance? You're still competing against yourself, because you get to wake up and make a decision every day of, I either get to work out or I have to work out. And the way that you view that decision and how you say the thing that you're about to do is what determines how compliant you are to the plan. Because if you've got a good coach and they've given you a plan to get you there, then ideally you're listening to the coach, right? You're doing and trusting the process. So if you can show up to the gym 3 or 4 days a week, good. That's one step closer. You are committed and you're taking action against it. Are you eating a little bit better? Are you eating 80% of your meals from food that you've actually cooked yourself? Even better. You're on the path, because those are benchmarks. Saying you're going to go to the gym 4 days a week and then eating majority of your meals at home, put a percentage on it. If you say, you know what, 80% is my benchmark for anything that I do. I have to be able to do it at least 80%, or it's not worth doing. then if that's, 4 days a week of exercise and some weeks you only get 3, that's okay. Because when you average it out and you get 175, for 2 weeks, that's an average of 87.5% compliance. Pretty dang good. Okay. Same thing with your meals. You can't get breakfast in, but you can get every other meal during the week and all your meals on the weekends at home. Fantastic. That's 80%. When you start to do these things and you start to figure out what those benchmarks are that you need to try to hit each week, that's when you start to compete with bettering yourself and being the best version of yourself. And I think the best way to look at this and how to figure out what that benchmark is picking a shot on the floor. You go into the gym and you say, you know what, I'm going to take 100 shots. Okay? It's something many of you have done 1,000 times. Okay? And when you finish, you've taken the 100 shots, you know instantly whether that session was successful or not. Because you've probably had in your mind, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to hit 100 shots. I'm going to make 85% of them. If you're hitting 85% of your shots on a shot that you are very comfortable with, it's pretty dang good, right? Maybe you hit 70. Well, then you go back and figure out what was off when you were trying to make 70%, right? Well, maybe you hit 80. Maybe it was just there was something wrong with the rim that day, because that does happen. Or 90, hey, you were feeling good, feeling great, right? This is the same idea that I was just talking about when it comes to benchmarks. Not every day is going to hit 100%, but that's okay. And if every day is 100%, that just means your benchmark is way too low. It's too easy. If it takes very little effort, then you probably need to add some complexity to it. If it takes very little effort, it's already ingrained in you, and you do it kind of like brushing your teeth. Hopefully, you're brushing your teeth, right? So here's the loop that I want you to remember. The big takeaway for today, other than not competing against other people. But if you actually want to take advantage of this and start competing against yourself, here's what you do. You set the benchmark, whatever that is. If it's going to be eating 80% of your meals from home that you cook yourself, awesome. Then you have to do that and track it, measure it, right? Reflect, and then figure out if you met it, went above it, or fell below it. And then your goal is to beat it the next time, right? So it's this idea of benchmark, measure, adjust, and repeat. And this is the same loop and same process that I use with my clients. And I've worked with hundreds of clients over the years, right? There's no exception. We test, we measure, we retest, we adjust, we repeat. And that process goes until a lot of these habits that we're trying to ingrain are non-negotiables, right? They are put into your daily routine, and then you can move on to whatever the next benchmark is. And the reason this is important is because this is never going to be someone else's benchmark. You get to push until it's automatically yours. And then, once it is a part of your daily routine, like I've already mentioned, then you make it a little bit more complex. So instead of hitting that spot up jumper that now you're hitting 85-90% of your 100 shots, you're going to add the dribble. You're going to pull up off the dribble. You're going to add complexity. And think of it this way, you're mastering one before you hammer the next. Okay, so the reason that I really like this, okay, is that you don't need to look externally for something to compete against, okay? This becomes a bottomless source of competition. And it's one source of competition that will never overwhelm you, okay? And it's not going to feel like you got to look at the scoreboard to see what's going on with the other team. This is your game, okay? You get to measure you against you. So let's bring it home, right? Now that you're down with OPP, other people's progress, is the default target that was your competitive drive gone? And if it's not, good, because that is the thing that's actually going to help you move forward. But what you don't want that competitive drive to become is a wrecking ball for your training, for your relationships, for your career, okay? Sometimes you put yourself in environments that actually make that competitive drive worse, okay? And the fix for this is not to go and kill your competitiveness, because that is what actually gives you an edge. When you add the physicality, the physical competence to your competitiveness, you might actually be unstoppable when it comes to things outside the gym, right? The way that we fix it is redirecting that energy into something that you can then work towards, that you're not going to measure against anyone else, okay? So if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Your biggest competition is in the mirror. Every morning when you wake up, you brush your teeth, you're looking at that person, they're looking back. That's your competition. It was your competition back when you wore a jersey and there was a scoreboard in front of you. You had a few people that you could blame your lack of success on back then, but now it's just you. And that could be the good news. Yeah, it could also be the bad news, right? But once you figure out how to direct that competitive drive, dog, you're going to be in a completely different space. Okay? So if you're sitting there and you're struggling to find a way to compete that doesn't wreck your friendships, it doesn't wreck your relationships or your peace of mind, let's talk. I just want to have a conversation with you. That's genuinely what I do. I'll share what worked for me. I'll get into more detail about it because I can only share so much here. But I want to help you find your next outlet together, right? So if you want to connect, you can hit me up here, shoot me a message. And if you're loving the show, the single most helpful thing you can do is share it with a friend so that we can continue to grow this thing. And like always, I'll see you next time.